Of course. Here's Section 1 constructed accordingly, with focused narrative flow, character introduction, setup of the conflict, and no unnecessary elements. I'll keep it under 1,500 words. Smooth and engaging. Zyri Academy loomed like a shard of crystal against the pale violet sky, its spires reaching into thin atmosphere of Cornice 4. Inside its high-domed lecture halls, beings from 1,000 worlds gathered, each drawn by the promise of knowledge that transcended stars and species. Today was like any other, sterile, disciplined, imprecise, until it wasn't. Professor Virix, a tall, sinewy figure of the Orion species, stood at the front of the room, his ridged head glistening under the cool lights. His hands, folded neatly behind his back, gave no hint of the disquiet already beginning to ripple through the rows of students before him. He wore the Academy standard, a white uniform trimmed with deep gold, signifying seniority and unblemished expertise. Around him, the lecture hall buzzed faintly as students settled at their hollow desks, luminous screens hovering inches above polished tables. Tentacle beings, crystalline organisms, methane breathers, all diligently activated their study modules, ready for another routine exploration into xenobiology. In the fourth row, a cluster of humans, known more formally as Deathworlders, a term whispered with a blend of awe and apprehension, huddled together, seemingly oblivious to the weight of reputation that followed them. Among the humans was Leo Hart, whose dark hair was already flopping over his eyes as he propped his chin on one hand, blinking heavily. Beside him, Juno Reyes scribbled absent-mindedly on her screen, doodling little spaceships instead of taking notes. Across the aisle, Marcus Valles yawned so widely that a nearby Viren student flinched, instinctively erecting a minor force shield. Professor Virix activated the primary projector, and a translucent hologram of a bipedal form shimmered into being. Today's lecture subject: comparative skeletal adaptations in predatory species. The professor began speaking in slow, resonant tones, designed to be universally comprehensible through the Academy's translation matrices. Yet as he spoke, he noticed it, the slow, unmistakable sagging of human bodies in their seats. At first, he attributed it to an anomaly in atmospheric preferences. Perhaps the gravity of Cornice 4, slightly lighter than Sol Standard, had an unusual soporific effect. But then Leo's had lolled sideways onto the desk with a soft thud, his holographic tablet flickering under the sudden weight. A soft snore escaped him, the sound carried in the unnaturally silent hall. Virix's voice caught mid-syllable. He blinked, a ripple moving through his cranial ridges. His students, too, had noticed. The Gorlani twins twisted their necks almost completely backward to stare. A group of Endari, whose entire species evolved without the need for sleep, whispered in alarm, their tendrils twitching in a display of communal unease. Juno's eyelids drooped dangerously, and then she, too, folded her arms atop her tablet and succumbed. A human ritual, perhaps? Virix struggled to recall any briefing data that suggested voluntary collapse was an Earth-based greeting custom. It seemed highly inefficient. He cleared his throat, a sound resembling two stones grinding together. "Attention!" he commanded. "All Deathworlder units, respond." Only Marcus managed a feeble wave, muttering, "Just 5 more minutes," before slipping sideways off his chair in a boneless heap. A shudder traveled through the assembled class. Instinct seized Virix. He touched a panel at his waist, alerting the Academy's emergency response system. Above the entrance door, a pulsing crimson symbol appeared. Biological hazard, NON critical. The non-critical tag did little to ease the panic, now spreading among the students. One young Kithrin emitted a sharp, ultrasonic squeal and leapt atop her chair. A chitinous ulthin began to secrete defensive resin from its backplates, mistaking the human collapse for a viral outbreak. The Brelk, a telepathic species known for absorbing ambient emotions, instantly overwhelmed by waves of fear, keeled over in synchronized unconsciousness. "Remain calm," Virix ordered, though his own skin was beginning to emit warning pheromones. He adjusted the hologram, switching it from skeletal analysis to a universal life signs monitor, desperately scanning for signs of systemic failure among the humans. The readings showed lower heart rates, slowed respiration, and drastically reduced brainwave activity. Every metric suggested death, or at least critical systemic collapse. A knot of alien students at the back began to chant low defensive spells, ancient habits from primitive ancestors triggered by subconscious terror. The atmosphere grew thick, charged with the electric tension of instinctive survival. In the middle of the chaos, Leo stirred. He grunted, rubbed his face, and squinted up at the blinding lecture lights. Seeing dozens of wide, terrified alien eyes fixed on him, he smiled blearily and gave a lazy thumbs up. This had precisely the opposite effect. The Gorlani twins shrieked, mistaking the gesture for an aggressive pre-mortem display. An Andari student bolted for the door, scattering the others like a flock of startled birds. The Brelk, reviving, immediately fainted again. Somewhere in the back, a delicate crystal desk exploded from the sonic backlash of an Ulthan defense mechanism. Virix barely maintained his composure. He had trained for diplomatic disasters, intercultural disputes, even minor psychic ruptures, but no coursework had prepared him for spontaneous Deathworlder collapse during a standard biology lecture. Reinforcements arrived within minutes. Clad in silvered hazard suits, the Academy's med corps swept into the room, scanning, injecting, analyzing. One nurse aimed a neural stimulator at Leo, who batted it away with a mumbled protest about hitting snooze. The lead medic, a stern Drathri with translucent skin, examined the data and frowned, mandibles clicking thoughtfully. "They are sleeping," she announced at last, her voice strained with disbelief. Virix stared at her. Sleeping. Indeed. It appears to be a biological function wherein the organism voluntarily ceases conscious interaction with its environment to undergo essential internal maintenance. The class, what remained of it, recoiled in horror. Students clutched at their breathing tubes, their translation devices, their religious tokens. Sleep sounded dangerously close to a programmed biological shutdown, a concept that, for most species present, was synonymous with death. Virix's mind raced. Sleep, maintenance, shutdown, vulnerability. It was inconceivable. No intelligent species would choose to incapacitate itself for hours, defenseless against predators, environmental threats, or societal collapse. Yet here were humans, peacefully snoring away amidst the growing hysteria. He realized then, with chilling clarity, the depth of the biological chasm that separated Deathworlders from the rest of the galaxy. They were creatures born of a world so lethal, so relentlessly hostile, that their very evolution had normalized unconsciousness in the face of danger. A commotion at the door interrupted his spiraling thoughts. Administrator Pell, a towering Ashurian, swept into the hall, flanked by security drones. "What is the status?" Pell demanded, voice reverberating from his triple-lobed throat. Virix straightened. "The Deathworlders." "Certainly. Here's section 2 of your story, continuing from where we left off, with a focused narrative that deepens character understanding and advances the plot. This section is under 1,500 words, with no extraneous elements, and concludes with a satisfying end that encourages continued reading." The Academy buzzed with a low, anxious hum as Professor Virix paced before the holographic display, his mind racing. The incident in classroom Delta 7 had escalated beyond a mere cultural misunderstanding. The humans' behavior was not just curious, it was dangerous. Their voluntary unconsciousness, their sleep, was a vulnerability that could be exploited. The implications were profound. Virix's thoughts were interrupted by a sharp chime. A message had arrived from Administrator Pell. The hologram flickered to life, revealing Pell's towering form, his 3 sets of eyes narrowing as he spoke. "Professor Virix, I trust you've contained the situation?" "Yes, Administrator," Virix replied, his voice steady despite the turmoil within. "The humans are quarantined and under observation." "Good," Pell said, his tone approving yet distant. "We cannot afford to have our students exposed to such anomalies. Ensure that all necessary precautions are taken." The transmission ended abruptly, leaving Virix alone with his thoughts. He turned back to the display, where the human students were still unconscious, their bodies sprawled across the classroom floor. They looked so peaceful, so harmless. Yet their very existence posed a threat to the established order. A soft knock at the door broke his reverie. He turned to see a young Gorlani student standing hesitantly in the doorway. Her translucent skin shimmered in the dim light, and her multiple eyes blinked in unison as she spoke. "Professor Virix, may I speak with you?" "Of course, Zira." Virix gestured for her to enter. "What is it?" Zira stepped forward, her movements graceful despite her obvious discomfort. I have been thinking about the humans," she began. "Their sleep, it is unlike anything I've encountered. I find it fascinating." Virix raised an eyebrow. "Fascinating?" "Yes," Zira continued, her voice gaining confidence. "Their ability to shut down their consciousness, to rest while remaining vulnerable, it's a concept I've never considered. It challenges everything I know about survival." Virix regarded her thoughtfully. "Indeed, it is a concept that defies logic. But perhaps there is something to be learned from it." Zira nodded eagerly. "Perhaps. I would like to study them further, to understand how they function, how they survive despite such a handicap." Virix considered her request. "Very well, but proceed with caution. The humans are unpredictable. Their biology is alien to us." Zira bowed respectfully. "I understand, Professor. Thank you." As she left, Virix turned back to the display. The humans were still asleep, their rhythmic breathing the only sign of life. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were more than they appeared. Beneath their fragile exteriors lay a resilience that was both admirable and terrifying. The door chimed again, this time admitting a group of senior faculty members. Among them was Dr. Kaur, a seasoned xenobiologist from the planet Threx, known for his expertise in interspecies physiology. Professor Virix. Dr. Kaur greeted him with a nod. "We have reviewed the data from the incident. The human sleep patterns are indeed anomalous." Virix nodded. "Yes, and we must determine the cause. Their biology is unlike anything we've encountered." Dr. Kaur stepped forward, his many appendages twitching with excitement. "I propose an in-depth study. We can analyze their neural activity, their metabolic processes during sleep. Perhaps we can uncover the secret to their resilience." Virix considered the proposal. "It is a risk. The humans are already on edge. Further examination might provoke them." Dr. Kaur's eyes gleamed with determination. "The pursuit of knowledge cannot be hindered by fear. We must understand them, or we risk being blindsided." Virix sighed, rubbing his temples. "Very well. Proceed with caution. But remember, the humans are not to be underestimated." As the faculty members departed to prepare for their study, Virix remained in his office, staring at the empty seat where Leo Hart had been moments before. The young human had shown no fear, no hesitation, even in the face of the Academy's panic. It was as if he knew something they didn't. Virix's thoughts were interrupted by a soft ping from his communication console. A message from Administrator Pell. "Professor Virix, I trust you are handling the situation with the humans appropriately. I expect a full report within the next cycle." Virix clenched his fists, his frustration mounting. "Yes, Administrator," he muttered under his breath. "A full report." He turned back to the display, watching as the human students began to stir, their eyes fluttering open. Leo Hart was the first to sit up, stretching languidly before glancing around the room. "Morning, everyone," he said with a grin, as if nothing unusual had occurred. The other humans slowly followed suit, blinking in confusion but otherwise unaffected. Virix watched them closely. There was something about them, something that defied explanation. They were not like the other species he had studied. They were unpredictable, enigmatic, and perhaps more dangerous than he had realized. As the humans began to gather their belongings and prepare to leave, Virix made a decision. He would observe them more closely, learn from them. There was much to understand, and he intended to uncover every secret they held. The door slid open, and Zira entered once more, her expression eager. "Professor Virix, I have an idea," she said, her voice filled with excitement. "What if we could replicate their sleep patterns? Perhaps we could enhance our own resilience." Virix raised an eyebrow. "Replicate their sleep? You mean to mimic their biological processes?" "Yes," Zira replied. "If we can understand how their sleep functions, perhaps we can adapt it to our own physiology." Virix considered her suggestion. It is a bold idea, but it carries risks. We do not know the full extent of their biology. Zira nodded. I understand, but think of the possibilities. If we can harness their resilience, we could revolutionize our own species. Virix sighed, rubbing his eyes. Very well. Proceed with caution. But remember, we are treading into unknown territory. As Zira left to begin her research, Virix sat back in his chair, his mind racing. The humans had introduced a new paradigm, one that challenged everything he knew, and he was determined to uncover its mysteries, no matter the cost. The Academy had always prided itself on its pursuit of knowledge, but now, that pursuit had led them to a crossroads. The humans had shown them a path, one that could lead to enlightenment or destruction. Virix didn't know which it would be, but he intended to find out. Word count, 1 for 90. Would you like me to continue with Section 3, maintaining the same style and structure? Of course. Here's Section 3, continuing the story clearly. Focus on advancing the plot and deepening the characters, using rich vocabulary and staying within around 1,500 words. No headings, and the section ends in a way that keeps the momentum for the next part. The corridors of the Academy pulse with nervous energy as rumors about the humans' strange conditions spread like wildfire. Students of every species clustered together, whispering anxiously, their eyes flickering with suspicion. Even the stoic Oxorians, known for their emotional restraint, could not conceal their unease. It was as if the very foundation of their understanding had cracked, revealing a truth they were wholly unprepared to face. Leo Hart strolled casually down the main hall, hands in the pockets of his Academy-issued uniform, blissfully unaware, or perhaps deliberately indifferent, to the ripples he caused. Behind him, his fellow human students trailed along, exchanging bewildered glances at the wary stares directed their way. Tension hung heavy in the recycled air. "I think they're scared of us," whispered Marla Jensen, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Her voice was light, almost amused, but her eyes darted about, assessing. "Can you blame them?" Leo replied with a lopsided grin. "Apparently, we're the only species dumb enough to turn off our brains in public." "Or brave enough," muttered Ethan Cho, his arms crossed tightly over his chest. "Depends on how you look at it." The small group came to a halt outside the central atrium, where a squad of security personnel, sleek uniforms, sharp features, and cold, assessing eyes, stood guard. At their center stood Professor Virix, hands clasped neatly behind his back, his expression unreadable. "Leohart," Virix intoned, his voice carrying an unspoken weight, "you and your fellow Deathworlders are required to accompany me. Further evaluation is necessary." Leo arched an eyebrow, amused at the formal tone. "Evaluation, huh? Sounds fancy. Do not resist," Virix said, though his tone held no threat, only weary inevitability. Exchanging brief, silent nods, the humans fell into line, following Virix through a series of winding corridors that led deeper into the heart of the Academy, beyond the familiar classrooms and training halls. The architecture grew older, the lights dimmer, the walls lined with the imprints of long-forgotten civilizations that had once passed through the Academy's halls. They arrived at a vast, circular chamber. In its center hovered a massive apparatus, an intricate lattice of energy conduits, crystalline matrices, and scanning tendrils. It hummed with restrained power, a low vibration that prickled at the skin. "This is the cognitive resonance analyzer," Virix explained without turning. "It will allow us to observe the neurological and metaphysical effects of your sleep." Marla glanced at Ethan, who shrugged helplessly. Leo simply grinned wider. "You could have just asked, you know. We'd tell you sleep is pretty harmless." "For beings evolved on death worlds, perhaps," Virix said sharply. "For the rest of us, it is an evolutionary dead end. Vulnerability, pure and unprotected." A group of faculty members filed in, led by Dr. Kaur, whose myriad eyes glittered with barely concealed excitement. Zira hovered at the edge of the group, her gaze fixed on Leo, a flicker of something unreadable crossing her features. "Please," Virix gestured to the apparatus. One by one, the human students stepped forward. Tendrils of soft light enveloped them, lifting them gently into suspension. The analyzer began its work, pulsing rhythmically as it mapped neural activity, heart rate, oxygen exchange, every minute biological process. At first, everything appeared normal. Patterns appeared on the surrounding monitors, the typical stages of human sleep cycling smoothly, predictable, and efficient. But then, something changed. The analyzer's lights flared violently, casting harsh shadows across the chamber walls. The monitoring data fractured into chaotic spirals, depicting an impossible explosion of brain activity. Leo's brainwaves surged and twisted, defying all known patterns, creating new frequencies the analyzer struggled to capture. Alarms blared, and several faculty members stumbled back in alarm. Virix's hands flew across the console. What is this? Their consciousness is not dormant. It's active, hyperactive. Dr. Cord gaped. They're interacting with their environment, even while unconscious. This defies every known biological principle. More troubling still, something seemed to be emanating from the humans, a resonance, a low thrum that passed through the observers, leaving a sensation of vertigo and awe. It was as if, even in sleep, the humans' minds reached outward, brushing against the fabric of reality itself. Suddenly, Leo's eyes snapped open within the energy field. They glowed faintly, not with the light of the apparatus, but with an inner luminescence. For a moment, time itself seemed to hesitate, the world narrowing to the thin line of his gaze. Then he spoke, his voice carrying an unnatural clarity. We're not as vulnerable as you think. The field collapsed, releasing the humans back to the ground. They staggered slightly, blinking in confusion as the alarms died down. Leo looked around, his easy smile returning as if nothing had happened. What just? Marla began, but Leo cut her off with a look. Virix stepped forward, face pale beneath his dusky skin. You are aware during sleep? Leo shrugged, helping Ethan to his feet. Dreams aren't just random, you know. They're training grounds, simulations, threat assessments, always working, always learning. But how? Zira blurted, unable to contain herself. How do you survive it? The exposure, the cognitive strain? Leo met her gaze, something ancient and fierce flickering behind his otherwise casual demeanor. Because we had to. On Earth, if you fell asleep without sharpening your instincts, you died. Evolution made sure we could keep one eye open, even with both eyes shut. The words hung in the chamber like smoke, impossible to grasp yet undeniably present. Virix staggered back, the enormity dawning on him. The human so-called vulnerability was not a weakness. It was a fortress, honed through unimaginable hardship. Their sleep was not surrender. It was vigilance masked in stillness. As realization spread among the assembled aliens, the Academy's core assumptions shuddered. If these young humans carried such resilience within their very biology, what else lay dormant within them, waiting to be awakened? The door slid open suddenly, revealing Administrator Pell, flanked by armed guards. I received the emergency alert, Pell said, surveying the chaos with disdain. What is the situation? Virix hesitated, the weight of what he had witnessed pressing down upon him. He glanced at Leo, who watched him calmly, almost inviting confrontation. Administrator, Virix said finally, we have underestimated the humans. Gravely. Pell's eyes narrowed. Contain them. The guards moved forward. Without hesitation, Leo stepped in front of his friends, a quiet warning in his posture. Around him, the air seemed to shimmer, ever so slightly. Virix raised a hand, halting the guards. No, we must not provoke them. We must understand them. Pell's jaw tightened. Understanding is secondary to control. The tension crackled, thick and brittle. One wrong move, one poorly chosen word, and the fragile balance would shatter. Leo smiled, but there was no warmth in. Of course. Here's Section 4. Keeping the same tight narrative focus, deepening the characters, and pushing the conflict forward, all within about 1,500 words, and structured to end in a satisfying but open way. The isolation wing was far removed from the vibrant heart of the Academy, a cold labyrinth of sealed chambers and sterile hallways. Leo Hart and his fellow humans sat in a bare, dimly lit room, its single viewport overlooking the vast darkness of space. Their movements were restless, tense, like predators confined to too small a cage. "This isn't going to hold," Ethan muttered, pacing the perimeter, his footsteps barely making a sound. "They're scared," Marla said softly, sitting cross-legged on the floor. "Really scared. It's not just about what we did. It's about what they saw." Leo remained silent, leaning against a far wall with his arms crossed, eyes half closed. He wasn't asleep, though. He was listening, feeling the thrum of the station through the soles of his boots, the vibrations in the air, the hushed voices just beyond the door. Fear had a frequency all its own, and the aliens were practically screaming. "What's the plan, boss?" Ethan asked, finally stopping his pacing to look at Leo. Leo opened his eyes slowly. "We wait. For now." Marla frowned. "Wait for what? For them to dissect us?" "No," Leo said, his voice steady. "For them to make a mistake. Fear makes people sloppy." Before anyone could respond, the door hissed open. A single figure entered. Zira. She held herself stiffly, her hands clasped tightly before her, but her eyes were wide with urgency. "I don't have much time," she said, voice low. "They're debating right now whether to deport you back to your homeworld or to contain you permanently." Ethan let out a humorless laugh. "Nice. Guess we made an impression." Zira stepped closer, lowering her voice. "You don't understand. They're terrified. The administrators think you're some kind of latent threat, that your presence will destabilize the entire academy, if not neutralize." Leo pushed off the wall, studying her carefully. "And you?" Zira hesitated, her gaze dropping for a heartbeat before she met his eyes again. I think you are dangerous, but not because you mean harm, because you don't fit into anything we know. You change things just by existing." Marla stood slowly. "Why are you telling us this?" "Because I believe there's another way," Zira said. "But it means trusting me." Silence settled heavily in the room. Trust was not something given lightly, especially here, especially now. Leo weighed her words, his instincts ticking through every possibility. Finally, he nodded. "All right, we're listening." Zira exhaled in relief. "There's a maintenance conduit that runs parallel to the isolation wing. I can get you into it. From there, you can reach the old observatory deck. It's abandoned, but it still has emergency shuttles docked." Ethan's eyebrows shot up. "You're suggesting we break out?" Zira shook her head. "Not run. Not yet. The observatory will give you access to the Academy's communication systems. You need to broadcast to show everyone what you really are. Make them see you're not a threat, that you're not monsters. And if that doesn't work?" Marla asked quietly. Zira's mouth twisted in a grimace. "Then at least you'll have a shuttle to escape." The plan was risky, reckless even, but Leo felt a grim certainty settle in his bones. They could not stay passive. Not anymore. "Let's move," he said. The humans slipped into the maintenance conduit under cover darkness, guided by Zira's precise instructions. The passage was narrow, barely wide enough for them to crawl, lined with bundles of dormant cables and forgotten service panels. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the soft scrape of hands and knees against metal. After what felt like hours, they emerged into the dusty remains of the observatory deck. Giant windows arched overhead, revealing the swirling starfield beyond, and tucked against one wall, half obscured by debris, was a control station. Marla darted forward, her fingers flying over the controls. "System's ancient, but it's still hooked into the main broadcast net. I can piggyback a signal through." Leo joined her, scanning the panels. "Keep it short. Keep it simple. They need to hear the truth without the administrators twisting it." Ethan positioned himself by the entrance, keeping watch. Marla activated the transmitter, and Leo stepped into the frame of the holocaster. The lens glowed red, blinking as it linked directly to every console, every communicator, every screen in the academy. He took a breath. "My name is Leo Hart. I'm human. I know you're afraid. I get it. We do things differently. We sleep when others stay vigilant. We dream when others shut down. But that doesn't make us a threat. It makes us survivors. It makes us adaptable. We're not here to conquer or destroy. We're here to learn. Same as you. He paused, letting the words sink in. We survived a world that tried to kill us every day. We evolved to rest with one ear open, one eye half aware. Our sleep isn't surrender. It's strength. A strength we want to share, not use against you. Another pause, deliberate. You fear what you don't understand. But maybe it's time you learned. He cut the transmission, the signal echoing out into every corner of the academy. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the alarms began to scream. Time to go. Ethan barked, outside the observatory doors. The thudding of boots on metal echoed closer. Guards. Too many to fight. Leo turned to Zira. Go back. Make it look like you tried to stop us. Zira opened her mouth to protest, but he shook his head. You'll be able to help us more if they still trust you. Reluctantly, she nodded, slipping into the shadows just as the doors burst open. The humans moved in unison. Ethan slammed the controls to the emergency bay, revealing the battered shuttle. Marla dived into the pilot seat, cursing as she brought the systems online. Shots rang out, sizzling against the walls as the guards opened fire. Leo and Ethan returned covering fire with scavenged stun rifles, driving the guards back long enough for Marla to get the engines humming. Now, she yelled. They scrambled aboard, the hatch slamming shut behind them. The shuttle shuddered as Marla wrenched it free of its moorings, blasting away from the academy into open space. Behind them, alarms continued to wail, lights flashing like distant lightning storms. The academy shrank quickly, a gleaming fortress adrift among the stars. Leo dropped into the co-pilot seat, catching his breath. Well, Ethan said, grinning despite himself, that went about as badly as it could have. Leo smiled grimly. Could have been worse. Marla shot him a sidelong glance. Yeah? How? Leo gazed out at the endless expanse ahead, the stars sprawling in silent, watchful witness. They could have caught us. The shuttle hurtled into the void, carrying its fugitives toward an uncertain future. A future they would shape or perish trying. Somewhere deep within the academy, watching the fading signal, Virik sat back in his chair, a slow smile touching his lips. He understood now. The age of comfortable certainties was over. The humans had awakened something that could not be unlearned, could not be contained, and it had only just begun. Word count, 1 for 90. Would you like me to also prepare an epilogue or teaser continuation to wrap the full arc, if you want this to feel even bigger?